Hi everyone, I'm Shelley and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another Question the Narrative video today, and today's topic is mythical creatures of the Bible and Judeo-Christian tradition. I did a video on the Nari Pond, something that I speculated to be either dryads or nymphs a couple of weeks ago, and someone in the comments asked me if I had any references to verses in the Bible that are referring to these mythical hybrids or these mythical creatures. And someone in the comments actually left a fantastic reference for some of these creatures. So I thought that I would go over some of these with you today and a few others that I also found either in the Bible or, like I said, in Judeo-Christian tradition, because sometimes there are things that you will find in these extra biblical texts or sometimes in Christian iconography that you will not specifically see in the Bible, but that I still thought was relevant to the video. So this comment says, Satyr is mentioned in Isaiah 34, verse 14, KJV. Other interesting examples are dragons, and there are two Isaiah verses there. The cockatrice, which is also in Isaiah in two different places. Men with lion-like features, or some people call them lion heads, in 2 Samuel 23:20 and 1 Chronicles. And he says, truth is stranger than fiction. So since he started with satyr, let's go there first. And I have done a video on satyrs before, so I'm not going to delve really deeply into any of these specific creatures. We'll just touch on them. And if anyone has, any really deep interest in any of these videos, just leave a comment and maybe I will make a future video where I'm focusing maybe on just one or two of these specific beings. So I checked out Isaiah 34:14, and one thing that you will notice is that many of the modern versions of the Bible will take out the names of these mythical creatures and they will replace them with more mundane animals. And I also want to point out that when I say mythical, I'm not necessarily saying fictional. I'm using mythical because that's what the secular world uses for these creatures, but I do believe that there is a very high possibility that even if they don't exist now anymore, that many of these creatures did at once exist, especially those that are specifically mentioned in the Bible. So Isaiah 34:14, if you go in the King James Bible, it says, the wild beasts of the desert shall also meet with the wild beasts of the island, and the satyr shall cry to his fellow, the screech owl also shall rest there and find for herself a place of rest. Now, if you just go over here, we'll go in the English Standard Version, you will see that it has changed out satyr for wild goat. And as I mentioned before, that's what happens in many of these modern versions. You will just see wild goat, and here wild goat, and down here in the Berean Study Bible, wild goat. Interestingly, though, if you look over here in the Old Testament translations, in the JPS Tanakh 1917, it says, and the wild cats shall meet with the jackals, and the satyr shall cry to his fellow. Yea, the night monster shall repose there, and shall find her a place of rest. And the Brenton Septuagint translation says, and devils shall meet with satyrs, and they shall cry one to the other. There shall satyrs rest, having found for themselves a place of rest. And just checking out over here, we see just some more examples. Now, we still see wild goat. Here we have shaggy goat, wild goat. But down here in the English Revised Version, it again says satyr here. And also down here, actually, in the Webster's Bible translation, it says satyr. In the Geneva Bible of 1587, it also says satyr. So what is a satyr? Well, one thing I will tell you is that a satyr is not just a goat. And I'm not going to read this entire thing about satyrs because they are some pretty nasty, lewd creatures. And I really don't even want to show any well, many photos of them because of the nature of them. And you might be able to see that right in the picture here on Wikipedia. But satyrs are typically half man, and they are, at first they were described as being half horse, but then eventually they started being described as half goat. So it's usually either half man, half horse, or half man, half goat. And over time, the half man, half goat creatures are the ones that are more well known. And they are also synonymous with fauns of Roman mythology. This is a less lewd version of a satyr that I could find, but it gives you an idea of what a satyr is, although I'm sure that most of you do know what they are. I will tell you that they were not known as these comical, funny creatures like what you see in the Percy Jackson series. They were pretty brutal and pretty gross, to be quite honest. And another place that you will actually find a reference to what can also be translated to he-goat is also in the Old Testament. In 1 Chronicles chapter 1 verses 38 to 42, it tells us about the sons of Ser. And Ser is a place or a person that you hear referred to quite a bit in the Old Testament. There are many passages that do speak about Ser. Now, Ser can also be translated as he-goat. So here on Blue Letter Bible, if you look up the pronunciation, I'm saying it wrong, I guess, is actually Seir. And what it tells us that this means is it can mean hairy or shaggy. And that might make sense if you're thinking of the shaggy goat reference in Isaiah that I just read in some of the other translations. It's a patriarch of the Horites, the inhabitants of Edom, before the descendants of Esau, the Edomites, which is also interesting because Esau was also known to be quite hairy, quite shaggy. And if we continue down here farther, it tells us that Seir also means goat. So yes, there is some correlation between the name Seir and he-goats or goatmen, or could they possibly be the same thing as satyrs? Now here we have the word Serim. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that's how I'm going to say it. And it says here, Serim are demons. Seir was the ordinary Hebrew word for he-goat, and it is not always clear what the word's original meaning might have been. But in early Jewish thought, represented by Targumim and possibly Third Baruch, along with translations of the Hebrew Bible such as the Peshitta and the Vulgate, the Serim were understood as demons. They are considered to be the lowest of all created beings. Serim are frequently compared with the Shadim of Hebrew tradition, along with satyrs of Greek mythology. Okay, so yes, there is a definite satyr connection. The fauns of Roman mythology, and jinn of Arab culture. Thus, Isaiah 13:21 predicts, "But wild animals will lie down there, and its houses will be full of howling creatures. Their ostriches will live, and their goat demons, or sayer, will dance." And that is the one that was translated as satyrs or as wild goats in the other translations that I showed you. Here it also says, similarly, Isaiah 34:14 declares, "Wildcats shall meet with hyenas, goat demons shall call to each other, thereto Lilith shall repose and find a place to rest." And that actually is something else to even look into, because I believe they're referred to as screech owls in many of the translations, but some of them, yes, actually use Lilith, which is from Hebrew mythology. In the Latin Vulgate translation of the Old Testament, Seir is translated as pilosis, which also means hairy. Jerome, the translator of the Vulgate, equated these figures with satyrs. So our very first hybrid of the Bible that we're going to be talking about today, or that we just finished talking about, yes, are the satyrs. So I will leave a link in the description box to all of the articles that I'm referring to here. I just do want to give you a warning, though, about the satyrs, is that you might not want to look into this around your children. You might not want to look up pictures of them or even read what the Wikipedia article says about them. Some of the mythology articles are a bit toned down, so maybe you could skim through them if your children are around. But yeah, they're pretty gross creatures. So next I'm going to go to Isaiah 34:13. And again, I am just going to go down to the King James Version just because many of the modern versions do translate these animals in a more mundane way. But the King James Bible tells us, and thorns shall come up in her palaces, nettles and brambles in the fortresses thereof, and it shall be a habitation of dragons and a court for owls. And I'm wondering if Lilith was originally used there. And I saw that here on Bible Hub. There's a treasury of scripture, and that's usually where you will find many of these older translations too. And here it says, and thorns shall come up in her palaces, nettles and brambles in the fortresses thereof, and it shall be a habitation of dragons and a court for owls. So dragons are well associated with the Bible. Typically, people will think of the dragon from the book of Revelation because Satan is referred to as a dragon. But in this verse that I just read to you, these dragons are treated as actual creatures, as actual animals. And just as I did see it might have been a TikTok video where someone mentioned that if you look at, I believe is it the Chinese zodiac? I'm going to look that up right now. So yeah, so I'm here on the Chinese zodiac. And if you look at the Chinese zodiac, every single one of these animals is a real life animal. The only one that people would question would be the dragon. So the question that many people have is, well, why would they have actual living creatures for every other one except for the dragon? And that really, I think, is a testament to the fact that dragons, if they are not real now, were once real. So the next verse that I'm going to be reading refers to something called a cockatrice. And this one, it was actually pretty difficult to find a translation that actually used cockatrice. Many of it has just been translated to the word viper. But again, we have the King James Bible, and it says, and the sucking child shall play on the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the cockatrice den. So again, we've got a reference to what most people would refer to as a mythical animal right here in the Bible. Down here, actually, it tells us in the Aramaic Bible, and a child shall play with a dragon. So this one doesn't, I actually just saw this now. So this one does not mention a cockatrice, but it does mention a dragon here too. So anyway, and then down here, again, cockatrice is used in the treasury of scripture verse. And also we see it right here in Isaiah 59:5. They hatch cockatrice eggs and weave the spider's web. He that eateth of their eggs dieth, and that which is crushed breaketh out into a viper. So again, yes, cockatrice is also in the Bible. So you might be wondering, what is a cockatrice? Well, it tells us that a cockatrice is a mythical beast, essentially a two-legged dragon, wyvern, or serpent-like creature with a rooster's head. And it tells us that the first English mention of the cockatrice was in the 14th century John Wycliffe translation of the Bible. The word was used for the translation of various Hebrew words for asp and adder in the book of Isaiah. So yes, because they always try to give you that more mundane explanation. But what we have found is that the Bible is anything but mundane. So now we are in 2 Samuel 23, verse 20. And yes, once again, you find the mundane version first. We'll just read the New Living Translation. There was also Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, a valiant warrior from Kabzeel. He did many heroic deeds, which included killing 2 champions of Moab. Another time on a snowy day, he chased a lion down into a pit and killed it. And you're probably thinking, okay, well, that doesn't sound like anything out of the ordinary. Well, let's read the English Standard Version, which gets a little bit better, but it's not quite the one that I'm looking for. But again, it is interesting nonetheless. So here in the English Standard Version we have, and Benaiah the son of Jehoiada was a valiant man of Kabzeel, a doer of great deeds. He struck down 2 Ariels of Moab. He also went down and struck down a lion in a pit on a day when snow had fallen. So the interesting thing about the word Ariel is that Ariel actually means lion men. So just very quickly, I can show you here that it tells us that Ariels and lion men are synonymous. So it says the lion men or Ariels were killed along with the lion. And so what you will see if you actually would click on this article, I think it just tells you that they fought like lions. But that doesn't seem to be the case, because usually what will happen in the Bible is that it will say that the people specifically fought like these animals. But that's not what we're seeing in these verses. These verses are not saying that they fought like these animals. They are saying that they looked like these animals. Indeed, the King James Version says, and Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, the son of a valiant man of Kabzeel, who had done many acts, he slew 2 lion-like men of Moab. He went down also and slew a lion in the midst of a pit in time of snow. So this is just a modern rendering, obviously, of what a lion man might look like, or a lion head man. This is an old statue. This is actually called Lowenmensch, and it reminds me of the show Grimm that I've mentioned here before. Some of the creatures there were called Lowen, and they were lion people in that show also. So this is something that permeates all of mythology. It's not something that you find just in the Bible. And again, I want to point out that when I say mythology, I'm not referring to the Bible as a fictional story. It is 100% real. When I say mythology, I'm referring to it in the way that the secular world does, because it's just easier to kind of talk about all of these creatures coming from all of the different worldviews in that way. On the website of Brian Godawa, who is an author, he actually goes in a little bit into the lion men of Moab, and he starts out just talking about them in his fictional book. But we can just read here that it says here also, in Hebrew, they are called Ariels. They are kind of like werewolves, but more like were-lions. In 2 Samuel 23:20, Benaiah, a valiant warrior, strikes down 2 Ariels of Moab. The word Ariel is a transliteration because scholars are not sure what it means. The King James and Young's Bibles translate these opponents of Benaiah as lion-like men of Moab, which captures the strangeness of the creatures but fails to express the religious or supernatural connotation of the word. Some translators translate the phrase Ariels of Moab as sons of Ariel of Moab, after the unlikely, is that the Septuagint Greek translation, or lion-like heroes of Moab. But there is no Hebrew word for sons of in the sentence, no indication of Ariel being a personal name, and no Hebrew word for warrior used in the sentence. The Hebrew word for mighty warrior, Gibberim, is used frequently throughout David's narrative, and that word is not here. The text says 2 Ariels of Moab. Some suggest it may be a reference to killing 2 lions, but the very next sentence states that Benaiah, the killer of the Ariels, then killed a lion in the pit. The Hebrew word for lion is not Ariel, but Arie. Adding the suffix "el" to the word adds a religious dimension of meaning that transcends mere lions. This is why Hebrew lexicons explain the most likely meaning as lion of God. El was not merely a name used of Yahweh in the Bible. It was the name of the figurehead deity of the Canaanite pantheon, as well as a general reference to deity in Mesopotamia. 1 Chronicles In First Chronicles, some additional warriors from Gad join David when he is at Ziklag, and they are described exactly like Ariel's as lion-faced warriors with preternatural skills. So First Chronicles 12:8 says, "From the Gadites there went over to David at the strongholds in the wilderness, mighty and experienced warriors, expert with shield and spear, whose faces were like the faces of lions, and who were swift as gazelles upon the mountains." Though animal-like abilities is a common metaphor used to describe extraordinary warrior skills, having faces like the faces of lions could mean more in light of the existence of these Ariels, or lion men of Moab. Since the tribal location of Gad was precisely all the land of Moab across the Jordan, I decided, and this referring to the author, to make the Gadite lion-faced men to be those very lion men of Moab, who converted to Israel and joined David. So he's going back to talking about his book. Again, I will leave a link to this in the description box also. But yes, there are lion men mentioned in the Bible. Raise your hands if you didn't hear about these guys in Sunday school class. So now we are going to move from the Bible to some Orthodox Christian tradition. And you may recognize this photograph from the thumbnail for this video. And this is actually supposed to be a depiction of Saint Christopher. Saint Christopher was said to have, now there is a legend that he carried Christ across a river when Christ was still a child, and he didn't reveal himself to be the Christ until after he had gotten him across. And yes, Saint Christopher is also thought to have been a giant. But there's more to him than just being a giant. And whether this is something that is true or just another legend, I think it's fun to look into. I scrolled down a bit to the relevant part, but here it says, in the Eastern Orthodox Church, certain icons covertly identify Saint Christopher with the head of a dog. Such images may carry echoes of the Egyptian dog-headed god Anubis. So yes, many of you are probably familiar with the dog-head god Anubis, and he is yet another example of what we might refer to as a dog man. And even in the United States, in Oklahoma, they're known to have dog man sightings. So this isn't even something that was just, hundreds of years ago. This is something that people still claim to see today. Christopher, pictured with a dog's head, is not generally supported by the Orthodox Church, as the icon was proscribed in the 18th century by Moscow. The roots of that iconography lie in a hagiographic narrative set during the reign of the Emperor Diocletian, which tells of a man named Reprobus. He was captured by Roman forces fighting against tribes dwelling to the west of Egypt in Cyrenaica and forced to join the Roman numerous Marmaritarum. He was reported to be of enormous size, with the head of a dog instead of a man. This was in line with the cultural beliefs of the time, which held that typical Marmaritae were tall, strong, and rascally. Being a kynocephalus was also consistent with this image. So what is a kynocephalus? It says the characteristic of kynocephaly or kynocephalus, having the head of a canid, typically that of a dog or jackal, is a widely attested mythical phenomenon existing in many different forms and contexts. The literal meaning of kynocephaly is dog-headedness, however. So Roman writer Pliny the Elder reported that the Kynamolgi of Ethiopia were men with the heads of dogs. Pliny's work, The Natural History, was, during the 1st century AD, a well-respected compendium of Roman science. It reports accepted knowledge about people from Cyrenaica. Pliny notes that these dog-headed men resided in Ethiopia, a name used to encapsulate areas of Africa west and south of Alexandrian Egypt by contemporary Romans. Then we're going to just skip down here. It says, it has also been speculated that this Byzantine depiction of St. Christopher as dog-headed may have resulted from a misreading of the Latin term Cananeus, Canaanite, as Canaanites, that is canine. Scholars judge the association with cynocephaly as more likely. And right here it does also say, according to the medieval Irish Passion of St. Christopher, this Christopher was one of the dogheads, a race that had the heads of dogs and ate human flesh. It was commonly accepted at the time that there were several types of races, the cynocephalists, or dog-headed people, being one of many believed to populate the world. The German bishop and poet Walter of Speyer portrayed St. Christopher as a giant of a cynocephalic species in the land of the Canaanians, who ate human flesh and barked. Eventually, Christopher met the Christ child, regretted his former behavior, and received baptism. He too was rewarded with a human appearance, whereupon he devoted his life to Christian service and became an athlete of God, one of the soldier saints. I want to go back here to this part right here, where it's speculation that it was a mistranslation from this word here and Canaanite, because it makes you think of this passage here. So Matthew 15 verses 21 to 27 says, "And Jesus went away from there and withdrew to the district of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, a Canaanite woman from that region came out and was crying, 'Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David, my daughter is severely oppressed by a demon.' But he did not answer her a word. And his disciples came and begged him, saying, 'Send her away, for she is crying out after us.' He answered, 'I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel.' But she came and knelt before him, saying, 'Lord, help me.' And he answered, 'It is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs.' She said, 'Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their masters' tables.'" Now, this is just complete speculation, but could the word Canaanite have something to do with the word canine? And could it possibly have not been a mistranslation at all? As soon as I saw that, was it this one? Yes. As soon as I saw this, it may have resulted from the misreading of the Latin term Canaanite as caninus, that is canine. But we do have here, so Canaanite and canine, and then we have here a Canaanite woman. Jesus is basically alluding to her being a dog. Now, we usually say symbolically speaking, that's how he's referring to her. But of all things, with what we're talking about, what are the odds? Now, giants aren't something that I really feel like I need to particularly go into very much, just because I've done so many videos on them so far, and you'll find those in my Question the Narrative playlist if you're interested. But giants are probably the best known, quote, mythical beings that are found in the Bible. And so this is just a depiction of them here. It shows an average man. Og of Bashan was between 12 and 18 feet tall. Early Canaanite giant scale. And let's not forget, so Canaanite is reminding me of the fact that they were referred to as dog-headed and giants. So I'm just wondering about that now. That's pretty neat. Okay, and we also have to say that, yes, it is also very possible that the people before the flood were giants, because there was a higher oxygen level in the atmosphere and everything was bigger. So imagine how big the actual giants were, the ones that are actually referred to as giants. So the next one that I'm actually going to get into are sirens, and they can be found in the book of Enoch. And I'll just read to you a bit. Here's first Enoch 19:1. "And Uriel said to me, Here shall stand the angels who have connected themselves with women, and their spirits, assuming many different forms, are defiling mankind, and shall lead them astray into sacrificing to demons as gods. Here shall they stand, till the day of the great judgment, in which they shall be judged till they are made an end of. And the women also of the angels who went astray shall become sirens." So it tells us here in the book of Enoch that the women who mated with these watchers were turned into sirens. And there are some differences about what sirens possibly were, and it doesn't really give a description of sirens here. You know, they're just assuming that the people reading it would know what sirens were, but there are different descriptions of them. So sometimes sirens are referring to women who are half bird. They usually have the face of a woman and then the body, feet, and wings of a bird. Sirens are also referred to as mermaids who are calling out to unsuspecting sailors, and they either sing or use their voices to lure these men to their deaths. That's just another depiction of a mermaid that I found different from what you usually see. You usually see these like beautiful sea creatures for mermaids, and it's like, okay, yeah. But if these women were turned into sirens as a punishment, I don't know. I don't know that they would be turned into something beautiful. And here, this is a photograph, and it says the sirens imploring Ulysses to stay. So this is from a Greek epic, probably from the Odyssey. I'm not 100% sure. But here they're not half bird, they're not mermaids, they're just women who are using their voices to lure these men to shore, and yet they are still called sirens. So let's read a little bit about sirens here. In Greek mythology, sirens are human-like beings with alluring voices. So here it tells us, that last picture that we looked at, they're human-like with alluring voices. They appear in a scene in the Odyssey, so it was the Odyssey, in which Odysseus saves his crew's lives. And so here, I'm just looking over here, and this is a siren too, and this one does have wings though, and it looks like bird feet right here. Here is another one, half woman, half bird. A little further down, we see that sirens were later often used as a synonym for mermaids and portrayed with upper human bodies and fishtails. And this combination became iconic in the medieval period. The circumstances leading to the commingling involve the treatment of sirens in the medieval physiologists and bestiaries, with both iconographically as well as textually in translations from Latin to vulgar languages as described below. So here it says the sirens of Greek mythology first appeared in Homer's Odyssey, where Homer did not provide any physical descriptions, and their visual appearance was left to the reader's imagination. It was Apollonius of Rhodes in Argonautica who described the sirens in writing as part woman and part bird. By the 7th century BC, sirens were regularly depicted in art as human-headed birds. So, yes, there is a discrepancy. There's not a single definition of what a siren is. They're described as human-like. Some of them are described as part bird. Some of them are described as part fish or mermaids. And the book of Enoch doesn't specifically say that, but it does say that these women were turned into sirens. So lastly, I'm just going to go over some of the heavenly beings that are talked about in the Bible and the book of Enoch and in Judeo-Christian tradition. And they're given a blanket term of angels, when in fact, not all of the heavenly beings are angels. An angel is simply a messenger. And sometimes the word angel, which comes from the Greek angelos, it was actually even used sometimes just for people, were sometimes called angels. They were just messengers. Now, this depiction here is what you will typically find if you will look up a traditional rendering of an angel. But the interesting thing is that nowhere in the Bible are angels specifically mentioned to have wings. They always just look like men. And in fact, they eat. They just seem to be able to do everything that humans can do. And somehow the writers can tell that they are angels, but they are never just depicted as having wings. Now, one of the other, try to find it, one of the other heavenly beings is a seraph or a seraphim. So, a seraphim is a celestial or heavenly being originating in ancient Judaism. The term plays a role in subsequent Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Tradition places seraphim at the highest rank in Christian angelology and in the fifth rank of 10 in the Jewish angelic hierarchy. A seminal passage in the book of Isaiah used the term to describe six-winged beings that fly around the throne of God crying, "Holy, holy, holy." This throne scene, with its triple invocation of holiness, profoundly influenced subsequent theology, literature, and art. Its influence is frequently seen in works depicting angels, heaven, and apotheosis. Seraphim are mentioned as celestial beings and in the semi-canonical book of Enoch and the canonical book of Revelation. So they are depicted as having 6 wings. And down here, it tells us that the word seraph, which is very similar to the word seraphim, and they both actually have the same root word. It can actually mean fiery flying serpent, which I have talked about in some other videos. So here, this is a seraphim. For all intents and purposes, this is a seraph. Okay, I think seraphim is the plural. Getting the F sound in there somehow. Anyway, they were fiery flying serpents, and in fact, they were the ones that were sent into the desert to attack the Israelites for their disobedience when they were in the desert with Moses. So yes, they are seraphim too. Now, this is typically what we will get in Christian art as another depiction of a seraphim, which would be the 6-winged creatures. And the funny thing is that seraphim are mentioned in many different religions and worldwide cultures. And ours is the only one, the Christian religion is the only one that does depict them just more as human heads. The other ones all refer to them as serpent-like creatures. So, and again, the word seraph, it means serpent. So next we're going into the cherubs, or plural is cherubim. And many times when you think of a cherub, you think of these chubby little babies floating around with wings playing a harp. And that is not what cherubim look like at all. So as you can see here, cherubim have 4 heads. They have the head of, some people say eagle, some people say phoenix. They have the head of a lion, the head of a man, and the head of an ox. So yes, this is not a chubby baby flying around with a harp. This is a depiction of the ark that is said to have had, God commanded them to place cherubim on this ark. So this is a depiction of that. And as you can see again, you have the lion head, the man, the eagle, and the ox. The cherubim are also the heavenly beings that were placed in front of the gate to the Garden of Eden with a flaming sword to keep Adam and Eve out after they were banished for the fall. And here we have from Ezekiel 10:14, it tells us each of the cherubim had 4 faces. One face was that of a cherub, the second the face of a human being, the third the face of a lion, and the fourth the face of an eagle. And again, here it tells us a cherub, or known in the plural form as cherubim, is an angelic figure repeatedly mentioned in the Bible. Cherubim are described as serving the will of God, performing divine duties in the earthly realm. But it's funny how we very often will just change what we think these creatures look like, kind of just to fit whatever the narrative is at the time. The way they draw cherubs nowadays, it kind of reminds me of Cupid. That's what I think of. This, believe it or not, is a depiction of a heavenly being. This is a heavenly being called an Ofanim. And the Ofanim is the wheel-like being in the book of Ezekiel. And yeah, so they're the ones that are called Ezekiel's wheel. And here's another photo. We've got an Ofanim here. We have cherub here. Again, 4 faces. We've got this wheel. Heavenly beings, not all beautiful people floating around with wings. There were many different types of heavenly beings. And none of them were depicted in the way that we're usually shown that they're said to have looked. The Ophanim, alternatively spelled Ophanim or Ophanim, is also called Galgalim. They refer to the wheels seen in Ezekiel's version of the chariot in Ezekiel 1:15-21. So let's head there. As I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the ground beside each creature with its 4 faces. This was the appearance and structure of the wheels. They sparkled like topaz, and all 4 looked alike. Each appeared to be made like a wheel intersecting a wheel. As they moved, they would go in any one of the 4 directions the creatures faced. The wheels did not change direction as the creatures went. Their rims were high and awesome, and all 4 rims were full of eyes all around. So, well, let's just actually continue reading the rest of this. When the living creatures moved, the wheels beside them moved. And when the living creatures rose from the ground, the wheels also rose. And when it's saying living creatures, it's talking about the cherubim. Wherever the spirit would go, they would go, and the wheels would rise along with them, because the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. Yeah, mind-blowing. When the creatures moved, they also moved. When the creatures stood still, they also stood still. And when the creatures rose from the ground, the wheels rose along with them, because the spirits of the living creatures was in the wheels. This really reminds me of, there are many eyewitness accounts of what they call UFOs in the sky, where they say that it seems to them like the UFOs are actually living beings. And I can't help but wonder, were they seeing Ophanim? I just thought of that now as I was reading this. Had to say it. Now here, I do want to just point out that there are many different ranks of angels here, and I'm not going to get into all of them today. That I cannot say. Kayat ha-Kodesh, Ophanim, Aralim, Hashmalim, Seraphim, Malachim, Elohim, B'nai Elohim, Cherubim, and Ishim. And so the Elohim, to me, is the word that I always use as a blanket term for the heavenly beings. It just says here, Elohim, the plural of that, is a Hebrew word meaning gods or godhood. Although the word is plural, in the Hebrew Bible, it most often takes singular verbal or pronominal agreement and refers to a single deity, particularly the God of Israel in the majestic plural. The B'nai Ha-Elohim, or B'nai Elohim, as it says here, that's the sons of God that they're referring to in Genesis 6 is one example. They are also known as the Watchers, and it is Gary Wayne's theory that the Watchers were actually Seraphim, which is what we see here. And we did go over the Seraphim here. So I'll leave a link to this too if you just wanted to look into the different types of angels. I kind of just did the more popular ones. But yeah, and there are more here too. So we have seraphim, cherubim, thrones, dominions, virtues, powers, principalities, archangels, and angels. I'm going to be honest, I'm not one really for angelology. I don't think that it's very clear on all of these extra angels and everything. But if it's something that you're interested in looking into, the link will be there in the description box. But anyway, that's all that I have for you today. I'm pretty sure that I mentioned everything I wanted to. Although now I'm thinking of it, since Esau was said to have been red and hairy, yes, many people do liken him possibly to be related to Bigfoot. That's just something that I'm throwing in there at the very end, but it's not specifically spoken of in the Bible. But yeah, just the fact that he is described as being so hairy does have some people wondering if he could be the progenitor of the Sasquatch. Now I'm going to close though. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one either here or over on Instagram. And if you like my work, you can check out either my Patreon page or you can look into getting a YouTube membership for my channel. And I hope you all have a great day.